The private dining room at Bellissimo had been reserved for 3 months. Mom's 60th birthday was supposed to be perfect. 23 family members, Italian marble tables, fresh orchids at every place setting. My sister Jessica had spent 40 minutes describing the planning process to anyone who would listen. I arrived exactly on time, wearing the gray dress my mother had once called mousy. My parents barely glanced up when I entered. Dad was showing my brother-in-law his new golf clubs. Mom was admiring Jessica's Honda CR-V key fob, like it was a Cartier bracelet. Fully loaded, Jessica announced for the 3rd time. Leather seats, panoramic sunroof, the works. Eric and I decided we deserved something nice. I took my assigned seat at the far end of the table, next to my cousin's 9-year-old son who was absorbed in his tablet. The seating chart had been strategically planned according to Jessica. I was positioned as far from the birthday girl as physically possible while still being in the same room. Uncle Tom arrived 20 minutes late, slightly out of breath, his tie askew. He was my father's younger brother, a patent attorney in Silicon Valley who visited Boston maybe twice a year. We'd stayed in touch mostly through email, discussing obscure intellectual property law questions I'd had during my work. Sorry, he said, kissing Mom's cheek before scanning the table. His face lit up when he spotted me. Emma, there you are. He practically jogged to my end of the table, ignoring the empty seat beside my father that had been reserved for him. Uncle Tom, I said, standing to hug him. How's life after that $3.8 million patent sale? He asked, his voice carrying in the momentary lull of conversation. I told my partners about your moisture detection coating technology. Brilliant work. The room didn't just go quiet. It went silent in that specific way that makes your ears ring. Jessica's mouth was open mid-word, the story about her Honda's Bluetooth connectivity dying on her lips. My brother-in-law's wine glass paused halfway to his mouth. My father's hand froze on his water glass. My mother's face went through a remarkable journey: confusion, recognition, panic, and finally a desperate attempt at a smile. What patent? She whispered, but her voice somehow carried to every corner of the room. I calmly sipped my wine, letting the moment breathe. Uncle Tom, blissfully unaware of the bomb he'd just detonated, continued with enthusiasm. The agricultural applications alone are game-changing, and the licensing deals you structured? Emma, you're going to revolutionize crop management in drought-prone regions? You sold a patent? My father said slowly, each word carefully pronounced. For $3.8 million?
Last April, I said simply, to Agritech Solutions.
The deal closed on the 15th. Last April, my mother repeated. She was gripping her napkin so tightly her knuckles had gone white. That's almost a year ago. 11 months, I confirmed. Jessica found her voice. You're lying. You work at a library. I'm a research chemist at Dendrite Solutions, I said. I've been there for 6 years. The library job was during my PhD program. That ended in 2019. But you told us, Mom started. I never told you I worked at a library, I interrupted gently. When I mentioned my research position at Dendrite, you said, that's nice, dear, and changed the subject to Jessica's promotion to assistant manager at Target. I stopped correcting the assumption after the 3rd family dinner. Uncle Tom was looking between us now, awareness finally dawning. Wait, they didn't know? No, what? Dad demanded. That our daughter has apparently been living some secret life. Secret? I set down my wine glass. I sent you both an invitation to my PhD graduation. I mailed you a copy of my dissertation. I emailed you when I got the job at Dendrite. I called when my first patent was approved. You told me you were busy with Jessica's housewarming party. A PhD? Mom's voice had gone very small. You have a doctorate? Materials Science and Chemical Engineering, MIT, graduated summa cum laude. I turned to Uncle Tom. Thank you for asking about the patent. The licensing revenue is exceeding projections. We're looking at an additional $1.2 million over the next 3 years from the secondary applications. My cousin Rachel, seated midway down the table, started laughing. Not polite laughter, actual gasping laughter. I'm sorry, she managed between breaths. But Aunt Helen, you told me last Christmas that Emma was finally holding down a steady job shelving books. You said it with a straight face. I thought Mom looked at Dad helplessly. You thought wrong, Uncle Tom said, his lawyer voice emerging. Emma's patent has been featured in 3 industry journals. She gave a keynote speech at the International Polymer Conference in Geneva last fall. I assumed you were bursting with pride. The waiter appeared with appetizers, creating a moment of forced normalcy as plates were distributed. No one touched their food. Jessica recovered first, pivoting with the smooth desperation of someone trying to regain control. Well, that's great, Emma, but money isn't everything. Eric and I are focusing on work-life balance. My promotion to senior assistant manager comes with real leadership responsibilities. That sounds fulfilling, I said sincerely. More fulfilling than just selling some patent and coasting, she added, her smile sharp. Uncle Tom made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Emma's not coasting. She's currently heading the development team for a biodegradable plastic alternative. The preliminary results are extraordinary. If it works at scale, we're looking at a potential environmental revolution. We? Dad said. My firm handles Emma's IP portfolio, Uncle Tom explained. We've been working together since her 2nd year of graduate school. She has 4 patents currently in application, 3 already approved and licensed, and 2 more in development. The $3.8 million sale was actually her smallest deal. I watched my mother's face carefully. She was doing mental math. I could see it happening behind her eyes. Your smallest? She managed. The moisture detection coating had limited applications, I explained. Primarily agricultural. The previous patent, the self-healing polymer compound, licensed for $6.2 million to 3 different manufacturers. But that spread over a longer timeline. Jessica's face had gone blotchy. You expect us to believe you've made over $10 million? Not made, I corrected. Licensed. And the total is closer to $14.7 million when you include the royalty structures and the consulting fees. Though after taxes and legal fees, the actual amount is lower. The silence this time was different, heavier. My brother-in-law. Eric cleared his throat. So when Jessica told you last year that you should really think about getting a real job with benefits, you told me I was wasting my potential, I said to Jessica directly. You said I was 31 years old with nothing to show for it. You suggested I apply at the target you work at because you could put in a good word. I was trying to help, Jessica said weakly. You were trying to feel superior, Rachel interjected. We all watched you do it. Every single family gathering, you'd find some way to mention Emma's struggles while talking about your management training. Dad set down his fork with a sharp click. Why didn't you tell us? I did tell you, I said. Repeatedly, for years. You weren't interested in listening. That's not fair, Mom said. We've always supported you, Uncle Tom actually snorted. Helen, with respect, I've been at family dinners where you've introduced Emma as our other daughter while spending 20 minutes bragging about Jessica's retail career. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, you didn't even mention Emma in your gratitude toast. Mom's protest died. When Emma called to tell me about the agritech deal, she was crying. Uncle Tom continued, his voice gentler now. Not from happiness. She was crying because she'd just tried to tell you both about the preliminary offer. And you put her on speakerphone while watching Jessica's kids' soccer game. You said that's nice, honey, and hung up without asking a single question. I remembered that call. I'd been standing in my apartment looking at the offer letter, wanting to share the moment with my parents. The dial tone after they'd hung up had felt like a physical thing. We didn't know it was important, Dad said. A $3.8 million offer wasn't important enough to have your full attention, Uncle Tom asked. Jessica pushed her chair back. This is Mom's birthday dinner. Can we not do this now? You're right, I said, standing as well. I reached into my purse and pulled out an envelope, setting it in front of my mother. Happy birthday, Mom. She opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a check for $50,000. What is this? She whispered. A gift, I said. I thought about what you might need. Dad mentioned wanting to renovate the kitchen last year. This should cover it. We can't accept this, Dad said, but his eyes were locked on the check. You can, I said. It's a gift, no strings. Despite everything, you're still my parents. Mom started crying. Real tears, not the delicate ones she produced for sympathy at church functions. Emma, I'm so sorry. I never meant to make me feel invisible. I supplied gently. I know, you didn't mean to. But you did. We can fix this, Dad said urgently. We'll do better. We'll listen. I sat back down and Uncle Tom squeezed my shoulder supportively. I'd like that, I said. But it requires actual change. Not just promises at a birthday dinner. Rachel raised her glass. To Emma, the most successful person at this table and the one who's been treated the worst. Rachel, Mom protested. Am I wrong? Rachel challenged. Anyone? Someone want to argue that Emma has been ignored and dismissed at every family gathering for the past decade? No one spoke. The waiter returned, asking if everything was all right with the appetizers. The question hung in the air with unintentional irony. Everything's fine, I said. Could I get the papardo bolognese from my main course? Slowly, others began ordering. The dinner continued, but the atmosphere had fundamentally shifted. Uncle Tom stayed beside me, occasionally adding details about my work that my parents absorbed with visible shock. Jessica barely spoke, pushing food around her plate. Eric kept glancing between his wife and me like he was watching a tennis match. During the main course, my father asked, "What are you working on now?" It was the first time he'd asked about my work in over 5 years. I told him about the biodegradable plastic project, about the team I was leading, about the potential environmental impact. He actually listened, asking follow-up questions that showed he was processing the information. Mom kept looking at the check, then at me, then back at the check. When dessert arrived, an elaborate chocolate creation with sparklers, Jessica made one final attempt. Well, Mom, what do you think of your party? I think, Mom said slowly, that I've been a terrible mother to one of my daughters. Jessica flinched. Both of you, Mom corrected. Emma, I failed you by not seeing you. Jessica, I failed you by letting you build your identity on being better than your sister. When your sister was succeeding beyond anything I understood, it wasn't a complete reckoning. It wasn't a movie-perfect reconciliation, but it was honest. After dinner, as people filed out, Dad pulled me aside. The kitchen renovation, he said. Could we hire you as a consultant? I want to pick materials you'd recommend. I want to understand what you do. I design polymers, Dad, not kitchens. I know, he said. But you understand materials, properties, durability. I thought, he trailed off, looking older than I remembered. I thought maybe you could teach me something about what you do. It was a start. Uncle Tom drove me home. In the car, he said, "You handled that with remarkable grace. Did I have a choice?" "You had several choices," he said. "You chose the kind one." 3 weeks later, I received an email from my mother. No subject line. Just, "I framed your diploma. It's hanging in the living room. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you received it. A small thing." But small things accumulate. My father called the following Tuesday, asking about carbon fiber composites for a backyard project he was planning. The project was obviously manufactured, an excuse to talk. I explained the material properties anyway. We talked for 47 minutes. Jessica sent a text message 2 months later. "I'm sorry I was threatened by your success." "I'm working on it," I responded. "I'm sorry I let you think we were in competition." The kitchen renovation began in May. My parents consulted me on every material choice, asking questions that showed they were actually trying to understand my work. Mom started attending lectures at the local community college on environmental science, forwarding me articles she thought I'd find interesting. At Jessica's birthday dinner in July, Mom introduced me as Dr. Emma Richardson, our daughter the research chemist. She said it with pride that sounded genuine. Then she spent an equal amount of time talking about Jessica's promotion to department manager. Balance, not perfect, but progress. Uncle Tom and I had lunch the week after Jessica's party. "How does it feel?" he asked. "Strange," I admitted. "I spent so long being invisible that being seen feels almost uncomfortable." "You'll adjust," he said. "You're brilliant at adapting." The biodegradable plastic project received preliminary approval for testing in September. My team celebrated with champagne in the lab. I took a photo and sent it to the family group chat. Mom responded within minutes, asking questions about the science. Jessica sent a congratulations GIF. Dad called that evening to ask me to explain the project from the beginning. I did. He listened to the entire 40-minute explanation without once changing the subject. In November, I received an invitation to speak at an environmental summit in Stockholm. The speaking fee was $35,000. I accepted, then forwarded the invitation to my parents with a note. If you're interested in attending, I'd like to buy your tickets. They both came. They sat in the front row of my keynote speech. Mom cried during the standing ovation. At the airport heading home, Dad said, "I miss so much of your life." Yes, I agreed. Can I be there for the rest of it? I thought about the years of being overlooked, the dismissals, the casual cruelty of being forgotten in the same room you occupied. I thought about the check I'd given Mom, which they'd never cashed, instead framing it next to my diploma with a plaque reading, "Given with more grace than we deserved." I thought about the choice between holding on to pain and allowing space for change. Yes, I said. You can be there for the rest of it. It wasn't perfect. Jessica and I still had awkward moments. My parents still occasionally defaulted to old patterns, catching themselves mid-sentence and apologizing. But they were trying. Actually trying. On Christmas, Uncle Tom raised a toast to Emma, who taught us all that the quietest person in the room might be the most accomplished. And to second chances, Mom added quietly. I raised my glass to family. The complicated, messy, imperfect kind that does the work to be better. The patents kept coming. The projects kept succeeding. But the real victory was smaller, harder to quantify. It was in the phone calls where my father asked about my day, in the articles my mother sent, in Jessica's texts that no longer felt competitive. I had spent years being invisible. Now I was seen. Not for the money or the patents or the accolades, but for the person I'd always been, finally recognized by the people who should have seen me all along. The revenge, if it could be called that, wasn't in the revelation at Mom's birthday dinner. It was in the grace I'd shown afterward. In refusing to let their failures define me. In building a life so full and meaningful that their oversight became their loss, not mine. And in the end, in giving them the chance to realize what they'd almost lost forever.